fascination. But for weekends at a time, we would banish from our minds any thought we had, letting go. But why?
Yeah, so congratulations on the record. It came out in January 22nd, I believe. Is that right?
I believe, yeah, that was the date.
Yep.
22nd.
And so what was it like for you putting it out with everything swirling around as it is?
Well, I mean, we had wanted to release it. When I say we, it was like I was talking to Randy, the guy who did all of my press, and he's like, I really would recommend waiting until January.
Right.
Because I mean, the record had been done for a while, but we thought, last year was so sort of up and down, and we weren't sure what was going to happen with the administration. We weren't sure if lockdowns were going to change and businesses were going to. We had no idea. So we still don't have an idea either.
That's true.
We're not 100%, out of the woods, but I mean, obviously the vaccines are in play. And
yep.
So we have a little bit more of seems to be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Gotcha.
So we said, let's wait till January.
And you released it right when the new presidential things kicked in, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good time.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't, it was more for like, when would we have a chance of getting like traction with, Mojo or British rock magazines or reviewers, right. Like that. It was more calculated towards that than it was the
I hear you.
thing. But I'm sort of glad we waited, actually, because the response has been really good so far.
Right.
So
right.
Cool.
Now, the album is called Flight, and I know you've had a couple of EPs and things, but this is your debut as a full-length, long playing record. Is that right?
Yeah. This is the first album. Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, well, it's obviously you're not an upstarting teenager. So, what
I'm 22 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, wait. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What was the question?
Oh, I was just wondering what brought you to this point at this time in your life to put this record
out. Well, it was one of those things where, like, life has a way of dealing you different hands.
That's a fact.
And, back when I had written a few of the songs, which was ages and ages ago. I probably don't even want to say how long, but recording software wasn't sort of like available to me. And
right.
So, and then when I finally did get recording software eventually, like the learning curve for me was pretty steep too, because I've heard other musicians validate this, so I don't feel as weird about it. But, when you're not a musician, and I'm not a musician, I'm a songwriter, I'm a singer, but I'm not a musician.
Gotcha.
I mean, I can play enough to get, chord structures down and things like that. But like when I think of musicians, I think people who really devoted their lives to, or part of their lives to learning an instrument.
Sure.
And learning music. And me, I kind of just like, I'd write something and then say, oh, I have to learn how to play this or learn how to put it together. But back to recording software, it is one of those things where there's literally like an infinitude of sounds and instruments and everything to choose from, that
right.
If you don't have a solid idea of what you want, you just have a song.
Yeah.
But you don't really know how you want it to sound. You literally can spend like decades trying to figure out how you want things to sound.
Spoiled for choice, as it was, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, but it sounds like you had a definite idea of what you wanted to sound like on this record.
Yeah, for this, definitely, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the music that mattered to me, that still matters to me the most, is the stuff that I fell in love with in in the 80s.
Right.
And a few in the 90s, but mostly in the 80s. And, so Prefab Sprout, the Blue Nile, David Sylvian, to a lesser extent, not to a lesser extent, but later on, the Aluminum Group, who I discovered in the 90s,
Right.
the Chicago band. Yeah. And
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Brian Ferry in that list.
oh yeah, totally. I don't know why I have this. I mean, I'm wearing a Roxy Music shirt. If you
Oh, right. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know why I have a block on mentioning his name. I mean, yeah, he is definitely like the influence du jour for this record.
Yeah.
Everything from vocal style here and there, production styles on a couple songs, especially Perfect Words.
Right.
I basically wanted to do a late 80s Brian Ferry song, so
yeah,
you have it.
Yeah. And who's playing sax on Perfect Words? Is it a sax or is it a synth?
No, it is. It's I think it's an alto sax actually. And you know what? His name is escaping me.
Oh, that's all right.
Might have to cut this line. I would have to go check. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
He's literally a guy who he was really great. He we've never even met. Actually.
Right.
Like I got introduced to him in the internet, through another player. And I said, "Hey, I really need an alto sax player." He goes, "Oh, I've got this guy. He's really good." And he was so fantastic, but I can't remember his name.
That's right. So, were you working in a studio or were you working at home putting this together?
So the first sort of chapter of this record began in Oslo.
Okay.
The recording of it. My friend Ula from the Loch Ness Mouse.
Right.
He has a band in Oslo. They don't have a lot of traction here in the States, but they've got a following in Europe for sure. And he really liked my last EP, and I really liked his music, and we got along. He literally invited me to come out there
Right.
A couple of years ago to lay down some tracks. And he lives in the countryside in Oslo, right outside of Oslo. And so we recorded drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. Usually vocals you do at the end, but for some reason we was like, let's get the vocals down. And we recorded about 6 songs there. And then the other 3 that were left were ZRH, Perfect Words, and God, I think it was After. Those 3 we recorded much later.
Uh-huh. Okay. And ZRH leads off the album now. And I assume that ZRH is like the Zurich in the airport. Whatever.
It's the airport code.
Yeah.
Zurich International Airport.
Yeah.
You've just landed, a little drained, but looking good. Nothing or no one will disturb the clean lines of your suit. You've got modestly packed carry-ons. You've got your anonymous face on. And while you're here, you could be anyone.
And the genesis of that song really is funny. It's just like, as an American, generally Americans, when they go to the airport, unless they have a business meeting, they generally look like crap. I mean, they go there jogging suits or
Right. Sweats.
Sweats. They look. We do not look our best.
Right.
But in Europe, and especially in Zurich, I noticed there's one time we had a layover in Zurich. We were actually heading to Italy, but everyone looked fantastic. Younger men, older men, like there was no sort of generational divide. Like men looked great.
Right.
They dressed. I don't know if they dressed for the airport or just how they lived their lives, and so I was just very struck by that. I was struck by this, like how cool certain men looked and how cool they were dressed. And I just sort of started penning this idea about, one of these business travelers having an affair. And that's the genesis of the song.
Uh-huh. And the term that seems to be popping up to describe what you do is Sophista pop.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can relate to, or do you kind of cringe?
Well, it's funny. I used to cringe, and now I just I just started, embracing it, because originally, it's funny. I never had a word for the artists that I loved.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Everything But the Girl, Brian Ferry, Prefab Sprout, The Blue Nile. None of them really were recording in the same quote unquote scene. You know what I mean? Like they weren't part of the same scene. You weren't part of the Manchester scene. Or, if you think of any sort of British pop scene, they weren't related to each other. But for some reason, a lot of audiences, especially in the States, found themselves loving all of these same sort of artists. And what united them, I think, was this sort of sense of what gets penned as like sophistication, or sort of jazz influence, or samba influence, folk. And so, that music is the stuff that always mattered to me most. And
so what drew you to that? Because most of those artists that you mentioned are at least from the UK or Europe, and they have that vibe going on back. Yeah. I mean, it's very un-American. It's not Americana by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
So what made that connect with you?
That's a good question. Why do you like what you like?
No, that's true.
There's a sense of, I guess I've always been drawn to sort of music with like a sense of melancholy, and a sense of romance. And those artists tend to have that kind of thing in spades. I tend, for the most part, I'm not crazy about music that's for everybody. I tend to like, I don't like music for arenas. I like music for sort of smaller music for headphones, or more sort of private kind of experiences. That music always felt kind of private to me. Right. It always felt like it was for like maybe one or two people. Yeah. It's not for the stadium. You know what I mean? It's not. It's not U2. You know what I mean? And I loved a couple of U2 albums for sure.
Well, there's plenty of them, so there's bound to be one or two that you're gonna like.
Yeah.
Now you have a video for the second track, "The End Away," and again, there's a nice little saxophone happening in that one as well, I believe. So what can you tell me about how do you approach visualizing your music?
A friend of mine who lives in Brazil, Ronaldo, I met him through some other friends, and he had done a video for a band called the Book of Love, who were pretty big in the 80s.
Yep.
And he had done a video for them, and I really liked it, and I liked just his approach to montage and stuff. He has a really nice visual sense. So I kind of let him sort of run free with a lot of the like the stills and stuff that are in the video.
Right.
But I thought, I always had this idea that it'd be fun to have a video that looks like it was part of like it was taking place in a subway train where like the cars were zooming. We couldn't really do that.
Yeah.
Because neither one of us knew how, but the window ended up being sort of like that. So that window frame became the kind of framing device for the video.
Very good. You mentioned Book of Love. I haven't thought about them in years. I think I have a couple of their records back there. So I'm going to go scope it out now.
Yeah.
That's all.
I think they still tour occasionally.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just two of them now.
Yeah. Now another song I wanted to touch on was "Properly Wrecked by John."
fast asleep on a bed of nails, dreaming up the tallest tales you could tell. You could sail to the congregation. Words fell down and scattered fast. Promises were a thing of the past. Getting by, doing fine was everything that mattered. Oh. Had you been properly wrecked by John?
John seems to be something of an enigma in this song. I'm not quite sure, but and there's strings. I don't know if they're real strings or not because I can't tell anymore. But maybe you can tell me how you put this together and where the who John is.
You know that actually, I had no intention actually of having strings in the song, but Ula, this is like one of his one of his amazing touches is that he has the ability to, you know, stumble upon an idea and then throw it in, and it's like it works.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he said, you know, I think it would be really good, a good idea if we started the song with something that was sort of like taken from the bridge, and so that's why we started with that one line. And we toyed with the idea of just starting it just with vocals, but then he had this string idea. I can't remember. No, I think it was a sample because there were only 2 songs on the record that had real strings.
Which ones are those?
That's Bomb You Dropped,
right?
And the Bomb You Dropped and Still Empty Rooms, and both of those the arrangements were done by Joe McGinty in New York, who's part of the Losers Lounge troupe. And he used to work at the Psychedelic Furs for a while.
Oh yeah.
He was the keyboard player. But Properly Wrecked by John, I mean, it's about a friend of a friend. And, you know, she decided to become a nun, this person. But we always kind of like said to ourselves, you know, she's probably doing this because she's terrified of the love that she had for this dude,
right,
whose name is John.
Right.
And, you know, in other words, so I feel like I feel like she kind of used religion as a way of, you know, keeping real life away. So,
gotcha.
And real love. But, you know, it's not a judgment against anyone who, you know,
right. Gotcha. Yeah. You mentioned the bomb that you dropped, and it has some interesting lyrical things going on with swimming pools and holes in the living room and all that stuff.
The bomb you dropped has left a lasting impression. 6 feet deep in the floor of my living room. If you come back, I swear I'll make it a swimming pool where we can float and forget all night long.
Oh yeah, that was just like one of those things. You're like, sometimes you just get an idea and you go with it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know where that came. I just started writing, and I you know, sometimes when you finish a line and you struggle, like, what's the next line going to be?
Right.
You know, because the first line, you know, the bomb you drop has left a lasting impression. I mean, that's usually like an impression on the mind, but I was like, oh, an impression could also be in the ground. So anyway.
So the album was released a month ago or so.
Yeah.
What have you? Obviously, you're probably not playing out. What are you?
No.
What's it been like this past?
I'm
month?
not even playing in.
Right.
You know.
I like that.
Well, you know, I would love to play this record live. I haven't played out live though in about almost like 10 years. I mean, I used to play around with like old, you know, musicians around New York, and I had a couple bands before this, but we never recorded anything, and but we used to play out live, and I love it. It's just, but the thing that's a little daunting about this record and playing it live is that I wouldn't want this just being like a couple guys with like, a guitar and a bass,
right,
playing just playing the structure of these songs. I would want the strings,
right,
I want the keys. I certainly would want the horn, the brass. So this is it's one of those things where it's going to require a little bit of organization,
yep,
and commitment from people, and it'll probably be a little costly, and I don't really have a label.
Gotcha.
But I might be able to swing a couple things, maybe a performance of like one or two songs or something.
Very cool.
For video.
Yep. Yeah. And of course you have to be able to have several people in a room at the same time as well, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. There is some magical stuff happening between musicians in different rooms and in different, time zones, like recording. I forget their names, but I just saw a remarkable performance of the song Ghosts from Japan by these two women. And like Japan covers are notoriously bad. Like every Japan cover I've ever heard is like not really that good. But these two women like knocked it out of the park. I wish I could have their names. Again, not a teenager, so I'm forgetting them.
That's all right. I'm even older, so I understand perfectly. Very strange. Yeah. Well, so have you been? I assume that these songs were written a while ago, and you've probably had time to ponder what you're going to do next musically. Whereabouts are you in that timeline?
I've toyed with a couple things. It's sort of, like part of me wants to do an EP of just early 80s R&B sounding stuff,
right?
Like the Gap Band or Patrice Rushen kind of stuff, like literally early 80s R&B. Like I love that stuff, and I feel like an EP of that would be fantastic. I'd love to do that, but I haven't written anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to like, it's sort of like, and I tend not to think thematically when I record or when I make music. Like I don't say I want to do an album of, it just so happened this record had a kind of 80s vibe to it, but that wasn't the goal originally. I kind of have to see what comes out, I have a few songs that are written. I have a few songs that are, could be ready for, the next step in recording, having musicians on, but I don't have like a set of record, like, I don't have a full length ready yet.
Yep. Well, we'll see what happens next. I guess everybody seems to have time to write these days anyway. That's a plus. So there's going to be a lot of new music coming out. And have you ever been down to this part of the planet?
No, I'm dying to.
Come on down. Well, very good. Thank you for talking to me about this. And do come down if you get a chance. Just wait at least another week until we're not locked down again.
Sounds good.
Yeah. But thanks for the record. It sounds great. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.